Hey, I'm Jay Arlay. Welcome back to another episode of the Level Up Business Podcast, where today we're going to explore the progress that Damien Stevens has made by implementing the Level Up Business OS to connect and, more importantly, have meaningful conversations with prospects so that together they can co-create content, they can deepen relationships, and how some of those conversations have actually led to conversions. They've led to business for Damian. Now, Damian is the founder and the CEO at Damian, you have to help me out on this. I get a little tongue twisted on this. I still have a speech impediment. Servosity.
You nailed it.
Servosity. And he's helping MSPs, managed service providers, win the war. And I love the way that's framed. Win the war against ransomware through backups. He's also the host of the MSP Mindset podcast. And he shared with me, and that's why he's here, that he wanted to be my first case study for the Level Up Business OS. So welcome, Damien. I'm so happy that you joined for this conversation today, buddy.
Yeah, I'm fired up to be here. I think it may help to understand that I started the podcast, and I think I started out of a frustration from I was doing a whole bunch of things outbound marketing wise, and I was like, that's not usually how I buy. You know, there's usually some good thought leadership, some good content, some other things. And then I start to, know, trust, and like that brand, that individual. And then there's usually, it makes a lot of sense. And so I just realized it was kind of out of alignment of how I see things. And, but I started the podcast to interview MSPs and best-selling authors. And, it was successful in terms of I interviewed really good people. People found the content good and of high quality. But there was something missing. In other words, it's a lot of work. And, when you run what I would call the traditional podcast YouTube channel model, unless you've got some other secret, I feel like it's a long tail. It's a long game. You got to have something else. And and I said, look, how do I go all in? How do I take this to the next level? And there was several missing components.
Well, I want to go back because that's when I met you, and we met through Platinum Elevated. It's a entrepreneurial coaching program, and as you mentioned, you'd been dabbling and doing some of this inbound, outbound, a lot of activity. And that's one of the things that I'm hearing talking to other B2B entrepreneurs is they're doing a lot of activity.
Yeah.
And that's good, but eventually you're going to tire. And I say it's good because it's better than doing nothing, which is the opposite side of the equation. So it's almost like we're looking at this as a pendulum. It's like we've got all this activity on one side, we got no activity on the other, and we want to come back to equilibrium here. And your goal, I remember this, and I was like, wow, that's an amazing goal. You set a goal for 100 conversations.
Yeah. I decided to, normally I wouldn't what I would call my shot. And I said, look, if I'm going to do this, I've got to do it. I think things will align because of that. And in the MSP industry, there's a list out there of like the top 500 MSPs. And you may be familiar with like your dream 100 customers. And I said, look, those are the biggest. Maybe not all of them are the right fit, but those are probably the dream customers. And to be honest, I was pretty scared when I said that because I was like, look, there's only about the top 500 on a list. The rest are not really on a list. The number 502 is probably a great, MSP could be a great client, but they're just not on a list. Like you can't find them. And so I remember saying that going, I hope this works. I hope that they say yes. I hope they get value out of it. I hope that I do because, if there weren't value, right, 100 episodes is a big commitment. It's a big commitment. It's even bigger because I was doing in that also at the same time switched from a 1 hour live feed. Don't recommend live most of the time. It's great for adrenaline. And but I switched to recording it. That way I could be whatever time, you can find those dream 100 customers. And also moved it back to an hour and a half type of format. So committing to 100 with a hour and a half, there's usually some show prep. So I basically made a 200-hour commitment just in the recording. It doesn't count, as you know, all the guest research, all the prep, all the other things that go into that.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. What has shifted? Because you were doing all this marketing activity. You were doing the live. What shifted in your own thinking throughout this process, and really an operating system, because it does systematize activity so that we're not burning our energy. We're actually focusing and harnessing it back in on the connection and the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's it. You're going to invest your energy. The question is, are you going to get much of a return? And I was investing it, and I enjoyed the interviews before, and people said they enjoyed the content, but it was this, long game. Some people watched it, maybe a few clicks, maybe out of tens and tens of episodes, we might get a lead, but I look at the way we were doing kind of the traditional podcast YouTube channel, and there was very little return on investment. And so the light bulb went off when we talked about the Level Up Business OS and what you're doing. And, it kind of allowed me to go, well, I know who my dream 100 customers are. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, I know that you can learn something from a small or a mid-sized business, but most people in the industry want to learn from the fastest growing, the most interesting. So if I can interview them, then the content itself is going to be far more interesting. And then, like a lot of people talk about, when you declare it, kind of the universe moves to make that happen. And I remember I was having trouble getting what I would call the typical MSP in some cases. And then when I said, I'm only interviewing the top 100, they felt more like it was an exclusive invite, which it is. They felt like they wanted to contribute to the mission. The other thing is, by virtue of going after those larger ones, they generally had they're super busy, but they had some ability to set aside some time in the future. Sometimes smaller businesses struggle. And they were thinking a little bit more about legacy. So they were like, this is a great mission. I've been wanting to give back and share. I've been in business for 20 years, and I've shared with my team, but I haven't shared all these lessons with anyone else. So to give them that vehicle has been tremendous.
And that's why I think what you're doing with MSP Mindset is so important, and it's something that other B2B entrepreneurs can replicate, because you're tapping into unique wisdom. And I define unique wisdom within the Level Up Business OS as your unique perspective and the unique methodology. And when we think about unique wisdom, this does not exist anywhere else. Mm-hmm. It doesn't exist in some commoditized AI, large language model.
That's right.
Wisdom is gained through experience. And so you're unlocking and capturing that and elevating others through this entire process, which gets back to your point about value creation. How is this, first and foremost, let's look at this through two angles. How is this created value? You were touching on this for those that you're inviting into the conversation.
Yeah, it was interesting to see, because there were some that had never been on a podcast, and there still are, because frankly, it's the IT industry. We're not known for being outgoing. We're known for being introverts. And right. So you have the folks, the occasional ones that are on stages speaking and, on TV and other things like that. But the norm is the introvert. They haven't told their story. And so there's a lot of them that didn't want to be on that. But even so, you'd get requests, be on my podcast, be on my podcast, be on my podcast. Well, they all sound the same, right? But I'm interviewing 100 of the fastest growing and most interesting MSPs on a planet, and that's my mission. All of a sudden, you're like, that's me, first of all. And second of all, they're like, okay, I see what you're doing. You're packaging that knowledge up and you're giving it back. And I want to be a part of it, because there's some like legacy component, right? I want to do that. I want, it gives them thought leadership in the industry, right? Because even out of a list of 500, and there's more out there, but even out of a list of 500, we're only choosing 100. So they get to be exclusive and be that thought leader. And probably the biggest impact, though, is they say, I get to share all these lessons that I've learned. And that's the thing they're so excited about. And I think as we've started releasing them, they're kind of surprised, as we'll, cross-post on social media, pull out a short here or there, and something that they still don't even think about. Because especially in like an hour, 20 hour and 30-minute interview, they kind of know what they talked about in general, but there'll just be a little clip that we pulled, and all of a sudden, tons of people are commenting on like, this is great wisdom and, that sort of thing. So I think that they're just happy to share it.
Hey, it's J.R. Lay. Quick message to help you apply some of what Damian is sharing, as I'd like to give you a copy of my best-selling book, Banking on Change. It is the leader's guide. It is the B2B leader's guide to achieving exponential growth in the age of AI. Now you can go and buy a copy right now off of Amazon for $30, or you can send me a text on my cell phone, 832-240-1922. That's 832-240-1922. And I'll send you a complimentary copy as a gift, because inside Banking on Change is all the lessons that I've learned as a B2B entrepreneur myself, studying the intersection of marketing, sales, technology, and human behavior for over the past 20 years. You're going to get dozens of practical strategic frameworks and thinking tools so that you can level up your mind, you can level up your marketing, you can level up your sales, and as a result, you can level up your business without sacrificing your well-being. Now let's get back to the conversation with Damian. It's interesting and these are the timeless truths that I'm encouraging B2B entrepreneurs to tap back into: connection, conversation, story, narrative. And you're nothing more than just a facilitator at that point, giving people space to open up and perhaps share something that they've really never shared before, but they want to, they just haven't had the platform to do so.
Yeah, that's part of the unique angle, is like holding that space. And then sometimes if they've interviewed I'm asking them, the unique part is really about their story, and I help get a kernel of like what really makes them unique, and then we go deep on it. So it sounds like a lot of time, but if we spend an hour and a half just talking about one or two areas, you really get to shine because we go deep on it. And then that ties to the other thing, which is, it just happens that is evergreen. And so many podcasts and so many channels, what they're doing is they're putting out clips and sound bites and cool things based on whatever AI model came out or whatever management technique is the coolest, right? And so these guys, it's the real story. And it's just as valuable 5 years from now as it is today.
See, and that's where I want to pause you, because we're talking about picking out the little kernels, and what we're doing is your perspective and my perspective are now cross-pollinating. And so we're creating and we're co-creating in real time, because these are not scripted. They're not well rehearsed. I've got a couple of questions to get the conversation rolling, but we want to let the path unfold naturally, organically, authentically. And what you're sharing is, and so that those who are watching or listening can understand, you're looking for the human perspective, not the tech perspective. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's exactly right. And I appreciate you calling it out, because there's tons of media, podcasts, YouTube channels, whatever you want to call it, that focus on tech in the tech industry. And I didn't want to talk about tech. It may sound odd, but that's not the thing I want to talk about. It's called MSP Mindset, because if you can transform your mind, you can transform your life. And that's what I realized. If I can focus on that thing that makes you unique and you can share that with others, you can help them transform their mindset and their life. And that is not only evergreen, but it's the thing I wanted to talk about. I don't want to, it's great to learn the latest, greatest tool, but there's so many places for that. And it's kind of, I feel like it's like the nightly news. Like, it's valuable for that short period of time, and then it's kind of nothing. And so the other reality is, I think if you ask any business owner, like, what's your number one challenge? what's the biggest thing you're focused on and it's really, it's hard, you're struggling with? The answer is never my CRM platform, or a tech tool, right? The answer is I've got too much turnover and I'm working on culture, or I am struggling to keep up with the growth, or I don't have enough growth and I'm trying to create that growth, right? There's so much more to it and so much more depth to it. And that's what is allowing these folks to tell this really incredibly unique story in a way that most of them have never told before. And that's helped give me that unique angle, because even the folks that have been on a lot of podcasts, I was blessed to have Jay Papasan on, co-author of The One Thing.
Yes.
And he told me, because he keeps a journal, and I don't have the number in front of me, but it was 180 or 200 plus podcasts he had been on as a guest. He has his own.
Right.
And I haven't shared this before, but he said, this is the best interview I've ever had. And, my jaw dropped, right? He's been a podcast host longer than I have. He's been a guest on more shows than the total number of episodes I've put out.
Yeah.
Right. But there's a process, like you said, to the research, to the questioning, to the way that this happens. And, you'll never see one of these interviews where I say, tell me about yourself. You haven't done your research. That is not a good first question. Right. So showing up prepared and asking some, insightful questions. And every once in a while, it's kind of funny if we happen to find something. My producer has been able to find sometimes something funny to ask about that they just never knew, that I could find. And there was one where the CEO came into work in like a pink dinosaur suit. So we're like halfway into the interview, everything's going well, but I just dropped that in the middle and they just bust out laughing for probably a good minute. And the thing besides creating unique and valuable content is, I think people were appreciative before I did this. But now, by the end of this, the outcome is generally, hey, when are you going to be in town? Can I go have a beer with you? Here's my cell phone number. Let's stay in touch. And so, obviously that opens up the door to do business, but it starts from a mutual respect. And that's everything. And before this, I'll just also add, because your top issue isn't a tool, right? And Servosity is people, process, and technology. And so that part of it is a tool. Mm-hmm. I couldn't get any of these guys to return our calls about any of that stuff, right? They're too busy. They got other people handling all these other things. But put together a well-researched podcast that often their peers referring them to now, and that flywheel is spinning, and they're just showing up left and right.
I want to tap deeper into something yourself, because you've been talking about the value that it's created for them, bringing others on, elevating them. What about yourself? How has this created value for you? How has this created value for your team? Because I remember you were sharing something like even your team is seeing things differently in regards to just client engagements.
Yeah, and I'll say this way. I have an amazing team. We built an amazing process to hire very unconventional people. But since we both do very, very technical things and serve very, very technical people, we're very much like our clients, a bunch of introverted tech people. And so the reason I say that is like the sales and marketing side is like a foreign planet to most of my team. They just don't know, like, what is that? Not only do they not have maybe the skill set, but it just seems like an odd thing. Like they don't even understand that. And my point in saying that is even my team, who kind of maybe comes at it from that perspective, has seen that not only have we closed business and that sort of thing, but we've had an entirely different level of engagement, an entirely different level of leaning forward, because, we did a lot of different outbound efforts. And one, as an example, is we used to just have cold calls set right into the appointment, into the calendar. And, I remember I'd show up on those and they're like, all right, you got 30 minutes. Tell me why you're different. Go. And so there's no rapport there. Even if you get them to the point where they're like, this is different and I want to move forward, generally it was like, okay, this tool's a little better than that tool. We'll swap the tools. And
transactional is what I'm hearing.
it's just transactional. Yeah. And so my team is like, well, these people are bought in. They want to know, what else can we do? How else can we drink this in? Like, this is now not gone from a transaction to more of a belief and a way of thinking.
You mentioned something, and you referenced the industry a couple of times here, introversion, because I think a lot of times, and I'm matching you. I'm meeting you where you're at. I'm extroverted, a lot of energy, but I'm slowing myself down specifically for the conversation with you, letting you lead. And that's just something after, doing 500 plus interviews myself, I meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
That's a big hang up for entrepreneurs I talk to. They're like, I don't, what you're talking about is great, but I'm introverted, or I have some self-limiting belief. Like, I don't want to be an influencer.
That's right.
What battles have you had to overcome here, just yourself, going down this path?
Every single one of them. If you want a good laugh, watch my first episode. Horribly nervous, right? All kinds of things. Because just like my customers, like I was more technically minded. I am an introvert. People often don't believe me now that I interview so often, and like you have developed certain match and mirror skills and other things like that. And but there's this, I can't do it. Other people do that. And I think it's easy to say, like, it was easy for me to get excited and do the first 3 or 4 podcasts, and that sort of thing, and be like, this is cool and it's new. It's like the honeymoon phase in almost anything you do. You're all excited. And then the reality sets in. Like,
right.
I don't know if I have another guest. And I don't know, and being an introvert, it really does. I'm curious. I'm highly curious. So I enjoy getting to not only meet them, but ask them questions and learn. But it took me too long to realize, even with my EA, like, let's not schedule too many of these in one day. Let's do this and this. Like, I need to show up in a certain way. And yeah, there's this fear that says I can't do it. This fear that has told me I'm not enough. And it doesn't matter. I could point at you and go, I'm not the extrovert, and I don't have this cool way that you have the intro coming in, or, you know what I mean? Like, no matter who you want to point at, you can point at somebody and find something different and make that your excuse.
But that's our uniqueness. And even, with the intro, I got tongue-tied on Servosity. I was like, can you just help me out? And we could go back and we could cut that, we could edit it out, but it loses the real conversations that we're looking for. And as we start to wrap up, thanks so much for just joining me and sharing a little bit about just the progress that you've made. I'm looking forward to continuing to see where you take this. I know you're looking to further leverage your time with other activities. What's next, and what would be one thing that you would recommend someone watching or listening do so that they can continue to level up their business as a B2B entrepreneur?
That last thing, what's one thing you can do to level up is a huge question. I'm excited to challenge myself. We went from interviewing one, actually, we were doing one every other week and releasing it. And then we had just started doing one a week. So we were doing about 4 a month, and now we're doing like 4 a week. And so we're still kind of releasing the same cadence. We have a massive content catalog now. But what I've noticed is you get better at it with repetition, and you start to notice those patterns. And along the way, I was encouraged by some of the folks to write the book about it, because they said, you're going to have 200 hours of the top people, and distill that down into another form. And so, I'm completely out of my comfort zone as I'm writing this book, but it's just been the blessing because they've been able to show up and give me all the challenges and all the answers. And so, all I've got to do is connect those dots, and a little bit like the podcast host, just be the facilitator. Yeah. And I guess if I were to answer, like, what do you do? I think it's going to depend on who you are, right? Right. I think I've been able to leverage my curiosity and my hunger to learn to be really sincere. I actually have had a couple people drop a comment and say, how do you seem to be so interested in every interview? And I'm like, well, I am. Like, right. Ask different questions. They go in different places. Like, I wouldn't be if everybody interviewed gave me almost the same answers, right? I couldn't show up and do that. You would see it in my face. You'd hear my voice. But I am, because there's different paths and different stories. And so leverage what your unique capabilities are and lean into that.
Damian, what I'm hearing from you is it all comes down to your uniqueness. It comes down to being curious, and it comes down to elevating others, but at the same time, deepening those relationships and leveraging time. Because as you mentioned, these conversations are now going to be curated into a little language model, a book that's portable. But it's not just about you. It's about the community that you're facilitating. It's about the community that you're elevating. And that's how we all continue to grow and get better and level up business together. Damian, if someone is watching or listening, they want to connect with you, what's the best way they could reach out and say hello?
Yeah. You can look up MSP Mindset and take a look at the podcast if you want to learn from it or how I do it on any platform, from YouTube to your favorite podcast platform, or just look me up on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you.
Connect with Damian. Damian, this has been a lot of fun. Subscribe to the MSP Mindset as well on YouTube and where all podcasts are. I appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah, thank you, James.
Now, if you'd like to level up your business like Damian is, send me a text and I will send you a complimentary copy of my best-selling book, Banking on Change. It is the B2B entrepreneurial guide to achieving exponential growth in the age of AI. Text me 832-240-1922. That's 832-240-1922. And I will get you a copy of Banking on Change so that you can lead yourself, lead your team to level up your business, all without sacrificing your well-being.